All right, this is the third video. Now you do have the paper in front of you. You can do the first set of problems, which are really a review of what we did last Friday in doing evaluating function composition, but this time we're using formulas. So I have to use a formula to get an answer and then plug in that answer into the previous function to get the final result. So just like before, I'm noticing that 14, 15, and 16 are all composition. And I know that because of this little open circle. So this is a symbol that stands for composition. And the way you read it is F composed with G at x equals 1. But another way to write this would be F of G of 1. And what that means is that we need to do this first in order to get some kind of value out of it, and then plug in that value into the outer function, which is f. So how do I figure out g of 1? Well, I have some formulas over here. So I'm going to figure out g of 1. And the formula says for g, if your input is 1, take your input, square it, and then add 2 times your input. That's what this formula says. Take your x-coordinate, square it, plus 2 times your x-coordinate. Well, if I do that, that's 1 plus 2. I believe my answer is 3. Great. So I come back over here, and I say, that's my answer, f of 3. Let me show both the work and then the process that I'm doing. Great. That's not the end of the story. I now need to take my input 3, or my output, which was 3, and treat it as my input into the f function. Well, the f function is this function. The g was this function. So the f function says, take your input, multiply times 3, and then subtract 1. Well, 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 minus 1, that's 8. So then my final answer here is 8. Function composition allows us to combine two functions where one function is inside of the other. Notice how g of 1 is inside of f of something. And so we need to do it in the specific order of inside, work our way out. We'll do number 15. G of f of 1. So in this case, f is on the inside. I need to do that first so that I can get an answer to plug into my g. So g is the outside function, and it's waiting for me to finish evaluating f of 1 in order for me to then take that input and plug it into the g. Okay, so now let's do f of 1. So I'm doing this side work over here. F of 1, let me use my green marker. F of 1 is 3 times 1 minus 1. Well, 3 times 1 is 3, minus 1, that's 2. So therefore, this is 2. But that's not the end of the story. Now I need to take that 2 and substitute it into the g formula. The g formula that says g of 2 is your input squared plus 2 times my input. Notice I'm saying input even though 2 was the output of the f, but now it becomes the input of the g. And so when I do this part, 2 squared, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4, and so when I combine them, that's going to be 8, and there's my answer. Hey, I got the same answer as I did with number 14, but I didn't do the same thing, right? Questions. I can't hear you if you have a question. So let me just go on and do number 16. Number 16, g of f of 0. Now this is eventually going to become g of something. So I need to figure out what is that something. What is f of 0, the number that's going to go here. So again, over here on the side, I'm going to go ahead and find f of 0. According to the formula, multiply 3 times your input minus 1. Well, 3 times 0 is 0. And 0 minus 1 is negative 1, so that's the number that goes inside. So f of 0 evaluates to -1. That is the answer to f of 0. But now I'm going to use that number and plug it into the g. And this is where you have to be careful because I'm dealing with a negative. So g of -1 means -1 squared plus 2 times -1. Your input, -1 squared, plus 2 times your input, which is -1. Well, that's going to give me +1 plus this is going to give me -2. And when I combine those, well, that's equal to -1. That's how we do function composition with equations. And that was the third evaluation of composition that we learned last week. I'm quickly going to do one from, let's do two from 20 through 23, and then we'll pause the video and we'll come up with the new video of what happens when I don't have a value x number to plug in, but instead I have a function. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Let's do 20 and 23. So f of g of 2. So I got to find out what this is first, because that is going to be what I need for the next step, right? So I come over here and I say, what's g of 2? Well, g of 2 means take your input, subtract 3, and divide by 2, because that's what the formula says to do. Take your x value, your input, subtract 3, and divide that answer by 2. Well, 2 minus 3, that's -1, divided by 2, that's -1/2. So that's my answer, -1/2. If you want to write it as -0.5, you can. I'm going to leave it as a fraction because now I'm going to use the f rule, and I'm going to find f of -1/2. Well, that's 2 times your x coordinate plus 3. 2 times -1/2 is -1 plus 3, that's +2. And so my final answer here is +2. Again, inside first, get an answer, use that answer as the inside to the next function. Number 23 is the last one we'll do in this video, g of f of 10. That means eventually I'm going to find g of something, but I need to figure out what is this f of 10 because I'm going to plug it in there. According to the formula, f of 10 is double your x value plus 3. Where am I getting that? Right here, this formula. Double x, so double 10 plus 3. If you double 10, you get 20, and 20 plus 3, that would be 23. That's the number that goes here. But we then need to evaluate g of 23. Well, according to the g function, g of 23 is your x input, x value, minus 3 divided by 2. 23 minus 3 is 20, and 20 divided by 2 is 10, and that would be the answer to number 23. I just want to plant the seed here. Notice my input was 2. I did this composition. My final answer was 2. My input was 10. I did all of this composition. My final result was also 10. That doesn't always happen. There's something special about these two functions that makes this happen. It didn't happen with these. My input was 0. My final result was -1, not the same number. My input was 1. My final result was 8, not the same number. But over here, my input and then my composition output are the same. That's how you do evaluation of function composition using equations.